going to start the session. Good evening, friends who are joining from India. Good morning to all those who are joining from the US. Good afternoon to those from Europe. And of course, late evening for those joining from Ulaanbaatar and in other parts of Asia and Australia. So it's another Eve session today. Again, we are going to be focusing on what's happening with regard to Communist Party of China. Thank you for joining this session. And this is a topic that's been grippingly debated the world over among human rights activists who are keenly watching what is happening in Communist China and the effects of Communist China on nations with which they are having bilateral relations, and how they are impacting and influencing those countries. In fact, through this webinar, we are going to be demanding the immediate release from prison of a Mongolian journalist and a human rights activist who also fights for the freedom of Southern Mongolia, which is under illegal occupation of Communist China. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj has been sentenced to 10-year prison by the Mongolian government for his outspoken protest against the bilateral ties between Mongolia and Communist China, and also standing up for the freedom of Southern Mongolia from illegal occupation of Communist China. For you to understand and to draw a parallel between this particular case, I just want to, I request all the participants to imagine a situation when a journalist or a human rights activist in the US is arrested and imprisoned for raising the voice of human rights of Ukrainians who are currently under siege by Russia. If that human rights activist in America is arrested and imprisoned for voicing for the human rights of Ukrainians, what would be the situation? So it's a situation like that. Or in the Indian context, just imagine an Indian human rights activist who's protesting against the persecution of minorities in Pakistan, and the Indian government, just to maintain the bilateral ties with Pakistan, is arresting that particular human rights activist and putting him in prison. It's a parallel situation currently in Mongolia. We are going to be discussing that, but just to tell you and highlight this particular case, the arrest and imprisonment of Munkhbayer Chuluundroj. This particular arrest and imprisonment is obnoxious and absurd as far as Law and Society Alliance's opinion is concerned. And on January 12th, over 100 human rights organizations the world over have signed a statement calling for the immediate release of this journalist and human rights activist in Mongolia. Law and Society Alliance is one of the signatories to this particular statement. We'll be releasing a press release statement in this regard tomorrow in the Indian media also. To tell us the story of Munkhbayer Chuluundroj, we have Engebadu Togochok. He is the director of Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center in New York. He is joining us from the United States today. We also have the attorneys of Chuluundroj joining from Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia. The attorneys speak only Mongolian, so their statements in the event will be translated into English by Dugarjab Otala, who is a colleague of Togochok from the Human Rights Information Center in New York. Just a couple of administrative announcements before I ask Togochok to do the introductions. First, as the speakers are making their presentations, I request all the participants to, put down your questions to the attorneys and Mr. Togochok in the chat box so that it can be addressed to them. I also request all of you to keep your mics on mute so that there is no disturbance when the presentations are made. We are recording this session so that the event can be transmitted and put on the YouTube channel of Law and Society Alliance for the wider audience to take a look at and understand this particular issue. So I request all of you to keep your mics on mute. So if the participants have any bandwidth issues at your locations because of any Wi-Fi connection, please keep your video switched off so that at least you can listen to the issues that are being raised in this human rights, activists being arrested and imprisoned in Mongolia. So with that introductions, I request Mr. Engebadu Togochok to give the details regarding the case of Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj. I hope my pronunciation of their names are okay.
Yes.
So, Mr. Togochok, please go ahead.
Sure. Good morning and good evening to friends and audiences who are joining from India and Mongolia. First of all, thank you, Mr. Bipinja, and your colleagues from Law and Society Alliance for organizing this webinar to discuss the case of Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj. So my name is Munkhbayer Chuluundroj. I'm the director of the Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center based in New York. Today we are honored to have Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj's defense attorneys, Mrs. Basen Gulik, she's in the middle, and Mr. Battor Jaltan, and Mrs. Sarol Tozern. We also have my colleague, Mr. Dorjav Hatla, who will be translating for the attorneys. So let me give you a little bit background of who Munkhbayer Chuluundroj is and what he did and what the significance of this case is. Mr. Chuluundroj is a citizen of the independent country of Mongolia. He is a long-time human rights defender, an award-winning journalist and writer. He is a strong advocate for the national freedom of Southern Mongolia, and he organized, coordinated, and participated in numerous conferences, meetings, protests to defend the rights of 6 million Southern Mongolians who are still under the Chinese colonial occupation. His recent activities before his arrest include publicly demanding the resignation of Mr. Oyunurtan Lobsang Namsren, Prime Minister of Mongolia, for his kowtowing to the Chinese and failing to safeguard the sovereignty and independence of Mongolia. As a result, Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj was arrested on February 17, 2022, and later on was sentenced to 10 years in prison on a trumped-up charge of collaborating with a foreign intelligence agent against the People's Republic of China. In other words, the independent and democratic country of Mongolia is imprisoning her own citizen in order to defend the national interest of China. The so-called the foreign intelligence agent is none other than the Mr. Rajendra Jamanan, the Consul General and the Second Secretary of Indian Embassy in Mongolia. As the defense attorney, Ms. Basengalik said, the act of state of Mongolia constitutes an act of treason. She said the government of Mongolia, the court of Mongolia, and intelligence agency of Mongolia are traitors to the nation of Mongolia and people of Mongolia. So what is the significance of the Munkhbayer's case? Munkhbayer's case is actually a dire warning to the rest of the world, including China's neighboring sovereign nations and free and democratic West, telling that Chinese threat is real and existential. China is not only the threat to the occupied nations of Southern Mongolia, Tibet, and East Turkestan, but also threat to the free and democratic world. So if we do not take action, what this case telling us is what awaits for your people and your country is the same fate that Munkhbayer had in Mongolia. Thank you.
Thank you, Togochuk, for that introductions. We will now move on to the attorneys of Munkhbayer to tell us about this case. If there are any questions that you have for the attorneys, you can please address them. But before we go to the attorneys, let me just introduce the host of the evening, Law and Society Alliance, or LSA for short. LSA is a 3-year-old think tank doing research on matters relating to China, Pakistan, and essentially India's as a neighborhood. Law and Society Alliance recognized the threat posed by China to India, essentially the kind of influence operations that they conduct against Indian interest. What Mr. Togochok said at this point in time with regard to this Munkhbayar's case is that the Chinese have tried to influence the Mongolian government to attack India. In fact, this journalist has been arrested and imprisoned because he had connections and links with an Indian consulate who was working in Mongolia on behalf of the Indian government under the Ministry of External Affairs. So please understand that this attack is not just on the journalist alone or on all the freedom fighters of occupied territories of the Communist China, but also against India and Indian interest in Mongolia. Please understand that. So before I go, I just want to highlight a couple of work that Law and Society Alliance has done. We are 3 years old, as I said, and in the last 3 years, we have done 2 important exposés, or rather study reports, research reports, which have created a lot of, and one of them is, mapping the Chinese influence operations in India, basically, which is basically their idea of winning a war without fighting. So let me just share with you that particular, the booklets cover so that you know what I'm talking about. Please hold on, give me a minute. I'll show you that. Okay, this is the cover of the study report that we did. Just hold on. Just hold on, please, 1 second. Just give me a second. I'll. Yeah, just a second. I was having a technical difficulty. 1 second. I'll just show you that particular page. Okay, are you able to see this page now? Can somebody confirm that you're able to see this page? I was
Yes,
having a
yes.
technical difficulty. Yes,
Yep.
okay, great. So
Mhm.
this is the report that we published last year. It's called as Mapping Chinese Footprints and Influence Operations in India. We mapped about 9 specific sectors where the Chinese have been doing their influence operations in India, especially in the entertainment industry, which is regarding the cinema industry, film industry, and also on academia, which is the educational institutions in India, journalists, among journalists and the media organizations, think tanks. So they were all being funded by the Chinese to buy the influence of these people, to write in favor of them, to create an opinion in favor of China against India. So this was the kind of activities that China was doing, and we exposed around 100 organizations based on this in this report. So the government of India has started acting against these institutions which are working in favor of India in the recent times. So this was one of the reports that we did. So with this, I'm sorry for the disturbance and the delay. There was a technical issue, so I was not able to show you that particular cover. So I took a little bit of a time. Thank you so much. But now let us move on to the attorneys to listen to them on the case relating to Munkhbayer Chuluundroj. The attorneys, the time is yours. You can state whatever you want to state regarding this case, and we have the translator who will translate it. Who will go first? Please introduce yourself and then.
Дуржав сонсож байна уу? Дуржав. Okay. Орчлоод өгдөө.
Олсон. За бүгдэнд
You are audible. You are audible. Please go ahead.
энэ саруул өмгөөлөгч, Аасан өмгөөлөгч, Батарч өмгөөлөгч. Бид гурван оролцож байна. За бидний үйлчлүүлэгчийн төлөө ингээ бүгдээрээ хамтраад ярилцаад маш их баяртай байна. За манай үйлчлүүлэгчийг одоо Монгол Улсын өчигдөр хэвсгүүдээр Энэтхэг улсын судалгаа үн шинжилгээний жигүүр байгууллага гэж байгууллагыг тагнуулын байгууллага гэж үзээд түүний тагнуулын одоо ажилтан үнэхээр буюу Монгол улсад суугаа Энэтхэгийн эцсийн сайдын яамны 2 дугаар нарийн бичгтээ уулзсныхын төлөө буруутгаж байгаа. Дуурж болчихлоо.
So we are the advocates of defense lawyers for Mr. Chuluundroj Munkhbayer, and we are Barson, the one in the middle, attorney Barson, and attorney Sarul on the left hand side, and attorney Battorch. And thank you for your interest and willingness to help our client. And our client was accused of being a spy against the People's Republic of China on behalf of India. And he was accused to be in contact with the second secretary at the Indian embassy in Mongolia.
За мөнгөөр нотлоогүй тэмдэргийг нотлох ёстой, нотлохоор энэ төр бол нотлогдоогүй. Нотлогдоогүй байхад Монгол улсын 3 шатны шүүхээр 5 удаагийн хурлаар энэ буруутгаад байгаа.
So the case of Munkhbayer was never approved with evidence and backed up by fact, even though it was never proved by any facts. He was given prison sentence. He was convicted of a crime and given sentence by Mongolian court, and the prison sentence was upheld by upper level courts as well, all the way up to the Supreme Court.
За ингээд ийм тэргийг нотлоогүй мөртлөө мөнгөөс 10 жилийн ял өгсөн байгаа. За бид нэр одоо цаашид олон улсын дэмжлэгтэйгээр мөнгөөр тулгаж байгаа энэ одоо хятад улсын эрхийг хамгаалсан энэ хэргийг нууцаас гаргахын төлөө зүтгэнэ.
So our client was accused to be a spy for the research and analyst wing of the Indian Defense Ministry.
Яг бид нар нөгөө энэ хэрэг нөгөө маш нууцын зэрэглэлтэй учраас бид нар энэ хэргийг
би нэг юугийн хэлэх гээд нөгөө энтхийн тэр нэг байгууллагын нэр байгаа шүү дээ. Судалгаа
Research Analysis Wings гэдэг байгууллага. Тэгээ энэ
тэр нь бас нэг ямар яамныхын дээр гэдэг үлээ.
Засгийн газрын дэр гэдгсэн.
Хамгаалах юм уу?
Ерөнхий сайдын дэр гэдэг юм байна. Ерөнхий сайдын дэргэд энэ тагнуулын үйл ажиллагаа эрхэлдэг байгууллага хэрвээ вебсайтаар мэдээллийн вебээр хайвал олдно.
That's
So
it's
intelligence,
called the
intelligence.
research.
Uh,
Okay.
Research and analysis wing
Research
is the external research wing, research intelligence wing of the Indian government.
Yeah.
under yes, under the intelligence organization of India, and even though his case was never proved, he was given a 10-year sentence, and his case is classified as the national security connected case, and therefore by classifying the case as such, they can have influence over the attorneys, whether or not they can talk to the journalists and so on and so forth. So that's being the most hard part.
За энэ энтхийн судалгаа дүн шинжилгээний жигүүр гэж байгуулгын дарга Саманта Кумар Гойл гэсэн нэртэй хүнээс захидал ирсэн гэж манай Монгол улсын тагнуулын ерөнхий газраас лавлгаа гаргасан байдаг. Тэгэхээр энэ лавлгаа бол энтхийн консулыг тагнуул гэж одоо үзсэн гэж. Тийм учраас тагнуултай хамтран ажилласан байна гэж одоо Munkhbayer гэдэг хүнийг одоо буруутгаж байгаамаа.
So the government says that there was a letter coming from some Samantha Goyal from of the research and analyst wing, saying that Munkhbayer was an Indian spy. He was working on behalf of India.
Уучлаарай, Munkhbayar гэж тэр нөгөө нэг энтхийн эцсийн сайдын яамны ажилтан
Тийм.
Мананг
Rajendra
яг
Chakmanan.
энэ
Not Munkhbayer. The government is alleging that there was a letter, and in which some Samantha Goyal from the research and analyst wing, saying that the second secretary, not Munkhbayer, second secretary from the embassy, his name is R.J. Manan, and R.J. Manan, the letter stating that R.J. Manan was the Indian spy.
And Munkhbayer worked with him.
Yes, Munkhbayer was
had
working,
a connection with Manan. That's why Munkhbayer is
Yes.
also accused of being spying with the government, for the government of India against the People's Republic of China. That's the claim.
Basically, for the benefit of the Indian audience, this case is also, India is also involved in this case, because the second secretary is Rajendra Manan. His letters is being stated, he is being called as the raw agent who was working in Ulaanbaatar, and that this journalist was in touch with this particular gentleman, because of which he has been accused as a spy, and also trial has been conducted, which is a it's a mockery of justice itself, and he has been sentenced to 10 years in prison. So this is for the benefit of the Indian audience, just to understand what the case is all about. Yeah, please go ahead.
Бид энтхийн эцсийн сайдын яамны консул Rajendra Chakmanan гэж хүнээс одоо асуудал гарах гэж одоо хөөцөлдсөн боловч уулзаж чадаагүй. Хүлээж аваагүй бөгөөд энд одоо Монгол энтхийн элчин сайдын яамд ажилладаг Монгол ажилчид бол ерөөсөө бид нартай харьцуулаагүй. Ийм дээ. Тэгээд одоо
So we made attempts to contact R.J. Manan at the Indian embassy, but we could not do that. We want to meet him and to prove whether or not, to see whether or not he is a spy or he has any working relationship with, he had any working relationship with the Munkhbayer, and we could not do that. And the Mongolian citizens who are working at the Indian embassy, they were not allowed to talk to us as well.
Энтхийн консул Манан гэж Рajendra-ха Манан гэж хүнийг бол тагнуул гэж үзэж байгаа тэр бичиг баримт нь бол ямар ч нотлохоо болохгүй бичиг баримт байдаг. Энэ баримтанд бол ямар ч албан загталж биш, албан тоотч биш, ямар ч бичиг баримт биш юм аа. Шаардлага хангахгүй, хамаг тэмдэг байхгүй, дугааргүй, албан тушаалд тодорхой юм байхгүй тийм бичиг баримт байгаа маа.
So the so-called letter from the RAW, the research and analyst wing of the Indian government, stating that R.J. Manan was a spy, was never really produced, and it has no official signature or an official number, seal, anything. It does not satisfy the legal requirements as an evidence.
Yeah, I had a question, Bipendra here. Could you just tell how long this particular case against Munkhbayer went on? When was he first accused of this particular charge, and how long did it take before the sentencing happened? What are the levels of the courts in which this case went on before a final decision happened? If you could just translate
Энэ
it.
хэрэг ер нь хэр удаж байгаа вэ? Хизээгээс эхэлсэн, тэгээд хэр удаж байгаа, хизээ одоо баригдсан гэх юм уу, тэгээд хизээгээс одоо энэ шүүхийн процесс эхэлсэн бэ гэж.
Шүүхийн процесс 2022 оны 2 дугаар сарын 17-ны өдрөөс эхэлсэн. Монголд мэдэгдэхгүйгээр бол 21 оны 9 сараас эхлээд мөрдөн өшгсөн.
So the arrest took place on the 17th December 2022, and that is when the case started.
February 20.
Baja. So the arrest took on the 17th of December 2022, and that's when the case started legally. But later on, they revealed that Munkhbayer was being followed starting September of 2022, being followed and surveilled.
So this particular case happened in what, the Supreme Court of Mongolia, or was it at any lower level courts?
Яг дээд шатны шүүгээр хэлцэгдэж байгаа юм уу, эсвэл доод шатны шүүгээр хэлцэгдээд явж байгаа юм уу?
Гурван шатны шүүх гурлаа хэлцсэн.
Дээд шатны шүүхийн гурал хийж авсан юм да.
Дээд шатны шүүхийн гурал 22 оны 12 сарын 21-нд болсон.
So the last hearing at the Supreme Court was on the 21st of December last year. And so far, the 3 levels of courts have already looked at the case, and the upper level courts all withheld the original court's decision, in other words, the sentence.
Okay. Could you just tell us something about Munkhbayer's activities with regard to Southern Mongolia as a freedom movement? Why basically he was targeted? So that I would like to understand that.
You're asking Togochok?
No, asking the attorneys to tell us the kind of activism that Munkhbayer was involved in, because of which he was targeted.
За Munkhbayer бол ерөөсө Монголд бол өвөр монголчуудын төлөө үйл ажиллагаа явуулдаг. Тийм хүний эрхийн төлөө тэмцэгч юм л дээ. Тэгэхээр энэ асуудал бол бидний таамаглалаар одоо 2 жилийн өмнөөс Хятад улс өвөр монголчуудын хэл соёлыг, хэл бичгийг одоо нэг өсөнд татгалцсан л да. Тэгээ багаас нь сурах асуудлыг татгалзсан. Энэ асуудал дээр Munkhbayar бол одоо маш идэвхтэй эсэргүүцэж, цуглаан зохион байгуулж, Хятадын элчин сайдын яамны гадаа олон хүн цуглуулсан лоодон барьс ажиллагаа зохион байгуулсан. Гэх мэтчлэн энэ ажиллагаа явуулсны дараагаас ерөөсөө тагнаж эхэлсэн байдаг тий. Тэгэхээр энэ ажиллагаа бол олон улсын хэмжээнд явуулж бүр Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын конгресс төртөл 100 мянган хүний тэр фэйсбүүкээр дэмжлэг авуулж хэлэлцсэн байгаа. Тэгээ энэ асуудлын төр бол нөлөөсөн байх гэтэл одоо бид бодож байгаа л да тий.
So Munkhbayar was a human rights defender, and he has been over the years writing and speaking in defense of the human rights of the Southern Mongolians under the Chinese jurisdiction, and he's been very active in that regard, and especially starting in 2020, the Chinese government officially prohibited the Southern Mongolians from learning their language. Basically, they started by banning the use of Mongolian language as the language of instrument and the medium language in the Mongolian schools in Southern Mongolia. So this particular event, because of that, Munkhbayar also, in regard to this policy, he organized demonstrations and protests in front of the Chinese embassy in Mongolia, and he has written articles, given speeches, and very active in that. Therefore, our guess is that this angered the Chinese government, and they requested the Mongolian government to take some action against the Mr. Chuluundroj.
Okay, so is there some sort of human rights violation with regard to his arrest that has been carried out and the sentencing that has been carried out? Was the trial fair? Was there a fair trial that was provided to Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj?
Munkhbayarыг одоо энэ баривчилсан тэгээд шүүхийн хоригдож байгаа энэ одоо бүх явцад тэр хүний эрхийн зөрчигдсөн ийм асуудлууд байна уу? Тэгээд шүүхийн процесс болон одоо шүүхийн гаргасан шийдвэр ер нь бол голч шудраг болсон гэж үзэж байна уу?
За Монгол улсын хуулинд олон улсын гэрээ конвенцэд байдаг хүний эрхийн асуудал хамгийн чухал асуудал. Munkhbayarыг эхнээс нь баримтлагатаа өөрт нь прокурорын зөвшөөрөл үзүүлэх, өөрт нь ямар хэрэгтэй одоо холбогдуулж байгаа гэдэг огт хэлээгүй. Түүнийг шууд араас нь дайраад хоёр гарын гавлаад машид авч хийсэн. Энэ бол одоо шууд халдсгүй байдалд одоо шууд халдсан гэдэг юм хүний эрхийн зөрчил байгаа нэгдүгээр. Хоёрдугаар Munkhbayарыг айлгын сүлдүүлсэн. Түүнийг баримтлаад бүтэн 4-7 цаг гарна ямар ч өмгөөлөгчгүйгээр түүнийг нэгслэг хийсэн, бид нь үзлэг хийсэн, гэрт нь нэгслэг хийсэн, өөрт нь одоо яг тулгсан. Энэ бол хүний эрхийн том зөрчил.
So his human rights was violated from the get-go. And when he was arrested, they never informed him of his rights, in relation to the international conventions and laws. They did not inform him of his arrest, the reason of his arrest, and his rights. And this was the beginning of the violations of his human rights. And secondly, he was not allowed to, he was intimidated after the arrest, and also was not allowed to meet his attorney for 7 hours after his arrest.
Хоёрдугаар том зөрчил бол Монгол улсын хууль, олон улсын гэрээ конвенц дээр шүүхээр эцсийн шийдвэрлэж ийж хүний буруутаа гин буруутаа гэж тооцдог. Гэтэл Munkhbayarыг баримтлаад маргааш нь тагнуулын газраас нийт ард иргэдэд шууд буруутан мэдээлэл цэцэд түүний нэр төр тавьдсан. Тагнуулын байгууллагаас.
So another major violation of his rights was, according to both Mongolian law and international legal procedures, one has to be considered guilty only after the court concludes so. But the government of Mongolia, they given out information, and also they through giving a press conference, starting from the second day of his arrest, long before the court procedures, they claimed that Munkhbayer was guilty of espionage and he was a criminal, as if he was already convicted. This is also a violation of his rights.
За Munkhbayerыг одоо өнөөдрийн байдлаар ганцхан өөрийг нь шүүхөрлөд оролцуулж байгаа. Өөр бусад оролцогчноор гэрч өөр нотлох баримтуудыг шүүхөрлөд маш бага ярьж байгаа. Нэг зөвхөн Munkhbayerыг шүүхөрлөд ядлагдж байгаа. Өөр бусад оролцогчноор огт оролцдог байгаа.
So by now, whatever hearings and other procedures going on, Munkhbayer is only himself is participating without lawyers, and very few times with the attorneys present, and only himself, and very few evidence is being presented. This is how his case is proceeding right now.
Нотлох баримтыг хангалттай нотлоогүй. Зөвхөн нотлох баримтыг ярих хэмжээнд тавиад, бичиг хэмжээнд тавиад түүнийг буруутгаж байгаа. Шинжлэн судлахгүй. Нотлох баримт ерөөсөө шинж судлахгүй буруутгаж байгаа.
So the evidence are giving very few, and also are not giving chance to be proved or disproved. And the only written information are giving, and not be given a chance to give evidence in spoken evidence.
Уучлаарай, тэр баасанч тэр нөгөө жахтлан ч гэсэн баг хуурмаг жахтал байсан гэдэг тэр талаар та өгж үжэн. Тэгээд нөгөө түрүү юу тагнуулын дарга, хуучин дарга байсан хүн өөрөө энэ жахтал бол ийм жахтал аваагүй гэж хэлсэн. Тэр нэг асуудал. Тэгвэл нөгөө нэг нь хамгийн гол нь тэгээд одоо Монголын хууль жүгийн талаар үндсэн хууль, Монголын хуулийн талаар тэгээд одоо нэг Монголын иргэн гадаадын одоо хятадын эсрэг жишээлбэл үнэхээр тийм тагнуулын ажиллаг хийжсэн ч ер нь тэгээд Монголын эрх ашиг талдаагүй юм бол Монгол улсын одоо аюулгүйн байдалд ямар ч хорл учруулаагүй байдалд ер нь шүүх тийм хууль жүгийн үндэслэл одоо ингэж ял толгох хууль жүгийн үндэслэл байгаа юу? Энэ талаар та нэг тодорхой ингээд тодруулаад хэлвэл их сайн юм.
За нэгдүгээр 2019 оны 9 сарын 9-нд Энтгийн судалгаад дүн шинжилгээний жигүүр байгууллагын дараагаас Монгол улсын тагнуулын байгууллага захидал ирсэн. Тэр захидлыг үндэслээд одоо нууцын тагнуулын ажилтнтай хамтарсан гэж буруутгаж байгаа. Гэвч тэр захидал өөрөө олон улсын болон Монгол улсын бичиг баримтын стандартыг огт хангахгүй байгаа. За тэр захидлыг анхнаас нь одоо Батөр зөвлөлтүүдийн зүгээс энэ бол хуурамч байна. Албан ёсны захидал биш байна гэдэг ийм байр суурийг өнөөдөр хүртэл гаргаж байгаа. За хоёрдугаар асуудал бол Монгол улсын одоо Munkhbayerыг буруутгаж байгаа тэр гэмтэргийн зүйл анги болвол Монгол улсын үндэсний аюулгүй байдлыг тусгай тогтнолын эсрэг хийсэн гэмтэрх үйлцэн хүнд орногддог. Гэтэл бүгд 8 дахь хятад ард улсын эсрэг хууль ёсоор ажилласан гэдэг нь Монгол улсын хуулинд байхгүй. Ийм одоо байхгүй зүйл залтаар одоо миний үйлчлүүлэгчийг гэм буруутаа тооцож 10 жилийн яд өгч байгаад л одоо өмгөөлөгч бид нэр бол хүлээн зөвшөөрч чадахгүй байна.
So this can be translated, please. Yeah.
Yes, the the so-called letter from, as we mentioned above, the letter from research and analyst wing of the Indian government intelligence. The government says, the Mongolian government states that there was a letter in September 2019 saying that the R.J. Manan was a Indian spy. But that letter, in our opinion, it does not satisfy the requirements of evidence by the Mongolian law and the international procedures. And secondly, yes. The secondly, the the accusation that were given out by the Mongolian government states that Munkhbayer was guilty because he carried out espionage activity against People's Republic of China, but there was no law covering that kind of activity in Mongolia. No law, specifically defining espionage activity against any other state, but the Mongolian law says only somebody may be guilty of espionage activities if they carried out certain activities against the national interest of Mongolia, but it does not say any other country or foreign country. So clearly the government is also violating Mongolian law.
So just
This seems
also
like
give me
completely.
Sorry, just add on to what Mr. Dorje translated. So the attorneys also said that they consider the letter itself is fabricated. It's not a real letter, that it does not satisfy the legal requirement as an evidence, because they confirmed with the former head of the Mongolian intelligence agency, and he said that he had never received such letter when he was in office. So that letter, and then also they think the letter they saw does not look like the genuine one. So that's the key. And then the attorneys they are believing that the Mongolian authorities they intentionally fabricated evidence to support their justify their criminalization of Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj.
So that seems like a completely sham trial that has been carried out, basically with the aim of persecuting anybody who talks against communist China. So they're trying to silence the voice of people who are speaking for the freedom of Southern Mongolia and other occupied territories of China. That seems to be the case in this regard. So there is one question from one of our regular participants, Mr. Dhruv. He wants to know if there is any past, dubious past of the current Mongolian Prime Minister, which kind of indicates any Chinese connections that he might have had, the Communist China's connections that he might have. Togochuk, would you like to take that question, please?
Sure. Actually, well, we don't know exactly what kind of connection the current Prime Minister Oyuritan has with the Chinese government, but Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj has actively, very strongly criticized the current Prime Minister for his very cozy relationship with the Chinese authoritarian regime. So, for example, Mongolian Prime Minister Oyuritan was the first state leader to visit China to join the Winter Olympics game in Beijing, and then he stated that China is the neighbor that is more precious than gold, and so Mongolia wants to on board with the Chinese for the development on the Chinese development, high speed train and so on. And so these are all the things that Munkhbayer is highly critical about. Now, Mongolia as an independent and democratic country should not have this kind of cozy relationship with the regime that is violating human rights, occupying Southern Mongolia, Tibet, East Turkestan, and so oppressing their own people. So that is one of the key point Mr. Chuluundroj was creating. Another thing is Munkhbayer also demanded the resignation of the Prime Minister Oyurden for his failure to safeguard the sovereignty of independent country of Mongolia. Not just forget about the human rights violation in Southern Mongolia. He cannot even safeguard the independent sovereign country of Mongolia. That's the key point that Mr. Munkhbayer was making before his arrest. I think all these activities, all this criticism, not only irritated the Chinese authorities, but also the Mongolian government.
Okay, that seems like a very strong influence operations of the Communist China inside Mongolia, particularly among the political class. So that's the kind of indication this particular case is providing us. So with that, we'll take on the last question of the day. I would request Mr. Togochok to talk about this statement that has been issued by the 100 human rights organizations all over the world. From India, Law and Society Alliance is a signatory to the statement. We are the only Indian organization that is a signatory to that statement on the human rights violation of this Mongolian journalist who has been imprisoned in Ulaanbaatar recently. If you could just tell us what the statement is, which are the organizations, if you could just highlight some of the few big organizations that are part of this release Munkhbayer campaign that is going on at this point in time.
Sure. This statement is jointly raised by the organizations, more than 100 organizations around the world. The lead signatories include the organization I represent, Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center, and also some support groups from friendly organizations, including Free Tibetan Support Group in Japan, and also Tibetan groups from UK, United States, and many other countries. So we also joined by Uyghur human rights groups, and also Hong Kong Taiwanese groups, in addition to our Mongolian community organizations around the world, including the Southern Mongolia, Northern Mongolia, or independent country of Mongolia, as well as Buryat, Kalmyk, Hazara, Tovan organizations. So other than that, we have organizations from like international human rights organization, including Pan America, Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, UNPO, based in Europe, and also here in United States, we have Committee on the Present Danger China and Captive Nations Coalitions based in DC. These organizations are very active in informing the public, American public, about the danger of China. So yes, there are many organizations, more than 100 organizations. So thank you for joining us to sign your name also. So the letter is to urge the government of Mongolia to immediately release Mr. Munkhbayer Chuluundroj, as the case is baseless, is trumped up, is politically driven. It's doesn't it doesn't serve any justice to Mr. Munkhbayer. So the request is to demand release him immediately. So the letters already sent out, and then it's shared by all of our friendly organizations around the world. So we are hoping that government of Mongolia take it seriously and review his case again, and as a sovereign and democratic, especially Mongolia is known as a model democracy of Asia in the West. But now, unfortunately, what the Mongolia is doing is pretty much acting like the authoritarian regime like China, very similar to the way China is acting. It's arbitrary detention, arbitrary arrest of own citizen, and then extrajudicial detention, and then arbitrary sentencing. All these are the serious human rights violation that one cannot imagine in a democratic and sovereign nation.
Thank you, Togochok. Law and Society Alliance is one of the signatories of this particular statement that's been issued by over 100 human rights groups all over the world. And we are very happy and proud to be part of this movement. We not only demand the immediate release of Munkhbayer, we also demand that the Mongolian government drop all charges that have been leveled against him, and for it to improve its bilateral diplomatic relationship with India, and to shun all ties with Communist China. That is the demand that Law and Society Alliance places as part of this group. I think Mr. Dorje wanted to make a point, additional point. Please go ahead.
So I just wanted to make a correction to the earlier translation. I misspoke of the date of arrest, which was in February, not December. Of 21 оны 22 оны баригдсан оны.
22 оны 2 сарын 17.
22 оны 2 сар. It was in February, on the 17th of February 2022, that he was arrested, and also we just spoke about the Mongolian Prime Minister, the Oyun Erden, and Munkhbayer was arrested on the 17th of February, and the Prime Minister was in China between 4th and 9th of February. So this is very coincidental. And we don't know what he talked with the Chinese and what kind of request he received from the Chinese. And as soon as he was back from visiting China, Beijing, he started arresting, taking out action against Munkhbayer. That is coincidental. And also because of some of the things he said in China while he was visiting China, such as China is a neighbor that we cannot trade with gold, and we would like to take take on the developmental train of China, things like that. So that was controversial in the Mongolian society, and Munkhbayer wrote an article about it, and he requested the prime minister to be resigned. So which one is the direct cause? We don't know. So on the 17th of February, Munkhbayer was arrested, and soon, the second day, the government gave out information saying Munkhbayer was a spy for a certain country. But then slowly it was revealed that that country was India.
So completely, it's a sham of a trial and completely trumped up charges based on false evidence. This is what has happened with Munkhbayer, and I hope the Mongolian government realizes the folly of engaging with the communist China and also falling into the trap of communist China. We have seen what happened with regard to its debt diplomacy that communist China has been practicing, in the Asian region and also in Africa. I hope the present Mongolian government realizes the mistake that is committing. We also demand and press upon this Mongolian government, to release Munkhbayer immediately and also drop all charges immediately. We put our weight behind it. We'll also campaign in India against this particular arrest, and we join over 100 organizations in calling for his immediate release. I thank you very much for joining this, especially Mr. Togochok for joining from US very early in the morning. And we know that he's a hardcore human rights campaigner against communist China, and we support him in all his activities. We also thank the attorneys of Munkhbayer for joining from Ulaanbaatar today. Of course, it's late in the evening. It's almost time to go to sleep, but they have been kind enough to join us and explain to us what this particular case is. I also thank the translator, Mr. Dorje, for joining and also doing the translation and helping us understand what the attorneys of Mr. Munkhbayer have been stating to all of us. I also thank the participants for their patient hearing. We have one statement from a legal luminary in India, a military legal luminary at that, Major General Nilendra Kumar. He was the Judge Advocate General of the Indian Army at one point in time. He's an expert in law, and he has clearly stated that this particular case seems like it doesn't seem like a fair and an impartial trial that has been meted out to Mr. Munkhbayer. We agree with the statement. With that, we end this program. We will be taking a break next week with our programs, but we'll come back with another program on the 28th of January, 28th or 29th of January. We'll announce the topic at the time. With that, I thank everybody. If you could just please translate to the attorneys that I'm very thankful to them for joining us and explaining this, and that we support their cause completely in this fight for human rights.
Munkhbayарын өмөглөгчд манай энэ хуралд оролцож тодорхой мэдээлэл өгсөнд их баярлалаа гэж байна. Тэгээд та бүхнийг одоо хизээч дэмжих болно бидний зүгээс гэж байна.
За баярлалаа.
Баярлалаа.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Have a nice day after this. Thank you.